der Grund, dass wir einen Experten beauftragt haben, sich die Situation im Stubaital anzuschauen.
The reason that we engaged an expert to assess the situation in the Stubaital Valley is that we are really concerned about the future of the valley. In fact, that the people, the policymakers who are today making the decisions to build the power plant may perhaps be in office for a few years. People will be living in the Stubaital Valley, on the other hand, for maybe 20, 50 or 100 years. And that is roughly the timescale on which we know whether we made the right decision or not. And it cannot be that on the basis of inadequate data. We take the risk of, for example, exposing the population to an increased risk of flooding catastrophes. The report that was to assess these risks to the residents is deficient in its current form. The more we learned about the Salrain silt storage power plant project in Kutai, the more we realized that the biggest problem is the morphology, that is, interference with the sediment balance, is a source of danger.
Der Eingriff in den Geschiebehaushalt.
Für den Laien erschließt sich oft nicht, warum die...
For the layman, it's not often clear why lifeless stones in the riverbed are so important. On the one hand, for flood protection, we have the problem that if the stones come to lie in the wrong place, the river can overflow its banks and find a new path. Such catastrophes are nothing new in Tyrol. On the other hand, one must not allow the transport of sediment to come to a complete halt, because such transport itself supports the regeneration of the natural life resources for many animals and plants and the groundwater of these alpine valleys, which have developed over thousands of years through the interplay of water and rock.
Zusammenspiel von Wasser und Gestein entwickelt haben. Wenn man eine Umweltverträglichkeitsprüfung macht, vergleicht man...
When one carries out an environmental impact assessment, one compares the present state of the sediment with that of the future, in particular on the basis of the composition of the sediment, whether that consists of small grains of sand, gravel or larger obstructions. These stones all move at different rates and come to rest in different places. Some don't move at all, depending on the force of movement. And it is on the basis of such estimates that we assess the safety standards for bordering residents, as well as how the habitats for the environment will develop. It is for this reason that it is essential to know the initial composition of sand, stones and gravel. The more errors in that estimate, the more errors in our prognosis of the risk to humans and nature.
Künftige Prognose und desto größer ist das Risiko für Mensch und Natur. Auf Basis von den Unterlagen, die der Umweltverträglichkeit...
On the basis of documents that are available for the current environmental impact assessment, it is very difficult to predict what the waters will look like in 10 or 20 years. That means that predicting the safety of humans and nature is not possible.
Sicherheit von Mensch und Natur nicht möglich ist. Das Hauptproblem, das wir hier haben, ist, dass die aktuelle Aussagefähigkeit, die wir...
The main problem we have is that the actual informational value that we have in the current environmental impact assessment is such a broad range that everything could remain the same, but equally the river could overflow its banks because of sediment deposits in the wrong place and can find a new bed, thereby destroying settlements or agricultural areas.
Auch landwirtschaftliche Flächen vernichtet. Gleichermaßen kann es sein für die Ökologie, dass durch den kompletten Stillstand des Geschiebetriebs...
In the same manner, ecologically, a complete halt to bed load movement could mean that the river chokes in its own sediment. Hence, there is the need for reports to be prepared that examine extreme situations. Such data would allow a reassessment of the project and determine whether it is feasible or not. But only then, unfortunately, at this time, this is not possible.
Nicht durchführbar ist, aber erst dann. Zum jetzigen Zeitpunkt ist es leider noch nicht möglich. Wenn heute die Entscheidung fällt, das Kraftwerk zu bauen, werden wir die Folgen nicht sofort erleben. Die Konsequenzen kommen erst nach mehreren Jahren Bauzeit.
If the decision is made today to build the power plant, we will not see the effects immediately. The consequences will only be apparent several years after it is built and after gradual changes in the stream bed. The stream bed will gradually shift, and not until the first catastrophic flood waters flow over it will it become apparent whether the prognosis was sound or not. We can see the worst-case consequences in here in the background. After the catastrophic flooding of August 2015, numerous construction machines have been in operation for several months, merely to correct the changes in a small side stream of the Ruhr's.
Die Kosten dafür sind immens.
The costs are enormous and no doubt will be borne by the taxpayer. By removing the driving force, if the project were to go ahead as planned, much sediment would naturally remain in the upper part of the valley and would not be transported away. The sediments would be lacking below the level of faultness and could lead to a sediment deficit there. That means that also below faultness, which is the current assessment, ends, there would be major changes. This would affect the lower Ruhr's, which in turn would affect the lower sill and thereby the city of Innsbruck itself. And for this area, no assessments have been undertaken. And of course, it is mandatory that for this area, it is proven that there would be no consequences for humans and nature.
Die Mensch und Natur gefährden. Die Auswirkungen, die für die untere Ruhrschlucht und
The impacts that today are already visible in the lower Ruhr's and Sill gorges are a so-called colmatage of the interstitial. This is adhesion of the sediments and a filling in of the pore matrix, which results in less space for small animals to retreat to, animals upon which larger ones such as fish and waterfowl feed. Similarly, a biofilm, a slimy surface, can form which further binds the sediments and compromises the habitat of higher forms of life. This can already be observed today in the lower Sill gorge, which has been diverted for barely 100 years and no longer has the regenerative push of sediment, which would be the case for a natural body of water. And exactly this risk now exists for the higher sections of the Ruhr's, but also for the Ruhr's gorge at a lower elevation than faultness. None of this can be established from the current report. But this is essential if further deterioration is to be precluded. For this is a requirement of the European Water Framework Directive, but is not demonstrated by today's report.
Das ist von der Wasserrahmenrichtlinie gefordert, aber mit dem heutigen Gutachten noch nicht bewiesen.